Hello, Stratters. I'm Nate. This is part 2 of my Introduction to 10 Tickets Modern series. This is the format for the league on MagicGatheringStrat.com. It's modern with the stipulation that your whole deck has to cost less than 10 tickets on Magic Online. Last week we did aggro. This week we'll be looking at combo. So if you haven't checked out the first one, feel free to check that out. So this week is combo, and this is where this format really gets interesting because we're kind of entering uncharted territory here. Last week with aggro, it turned out that most of the best aggro decks in Modern could actually be adapted into 10-ticket versions with fairly minimal changes. That turns out not really to be the case with combo. Most of the existing combo decks in Modern don't really adapt over all that easily. So I'll just show you an example of that to start. So here we've got Titan Shift. This is considered one of the better combo decks in Modern. The idea is, well, there's a few ways it can go, but if you get 7 lands in play and you play Escape Shift, you can sacrifice them all to get a Valiquette and 6 mountains. And all the mountains trigger Valiquette simultaneously and deal 18 damage. In Modern, that's usually enough to kill them. If not, you can do the last points with a Lightning Bolt, or of course, the more lands you have in play, the more damage you can deal. And as kind of a backup plan, it's got Primeval Titan as another way of fetching out a bunch of mountains to kill with Valiquette. So if we look at this for the 10 tickets format, Valiquette itself is quite cheap. The whole play set for just about 1.5 tickets, so that's fine. But then Escape Shift, really expensive, about 25 tickets a pop, so we couldn't play any of those. And Primeval Titan, almost 10 tickets for 1 copy on its own, so that would be out. So basically this deck, at least in its current form, would not be viable for 10 tickets Modern. We could try to build around Valiquette in a different way. And in fact, I think I'll show a deck list later that does that, but it's going to be a much different deck. And I found this was the case with most of the best combo decks in Modern. They didn't adapt in a straightforward way to a 10 tickets format. So, does this mean that combo is out in this format? No, I don't think it does. I think it just means we need to play different combos. Because if you sort of think about how competitive Magic works, the very best and most efficient combos receive a lot of focus, whereas everything else gets left by the wayside. But the Modern card format is really huge. There's a ton of cards, and it turns out there's a whole second tier of combos that are really not much worse than the combos that get a lot of attention. And the cards for those, for the most part, are very cheap. So that's sort of what we need to focus on. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, but it's going to require some more creativity on our part to build those decks. Another point, which is maybe not quite as obvious, is one of the most popular decks in normal Modern are the green-black mid-range decks. It's usually called junk if they add white or jund if they add red. But both versions are based around a core of really efficient green and black cards. They've got black 1-mana disruption in the form of Thoughtseize and Inquisition of Kozilek, and then really efficient 2-drops like Dark Confidant, Tarmogoyf, Grim Flare now. So basically they can go turn 1 discard into a turn 2 threat, and that sequence of ripping apart your hand followed by a very, very quick pressure to close out the game is really hard for combo decks to deal with. And all of the cards I just mentioned that form the core of that green-black deck are too expensive for this format. So basically that deck doesn't exist. Maybe someone can make a different kind of green-black mid-range deck that's still good, but it's not gonna be as efficient and deadly as those decks. So that gives combo a little room to breathe. So I think in that way, the format might actually be more friendly. Okay, let's now get into a few lists, and these are just lists I've thrown together or adapted. I'm not really sure which ones might be good, but I do feel like if you can find the right combo and the right build in this format, you might be onto something. So here's the first one, Niv Magus Storm. I got this idea from a Sam Pardee video. I mostly just took his list and changed a few cards to get it under 10 tickets. The idea is it's all based around Niv Magus Elemental, which can basically eat an instant or sorcery spell that you have on the stack to put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And here we abuse the interaction with storm spells like Ground Drift and Grape Shot. It turns out that storm copies do work for Niv Magus Elemental. You can eat the storm copies according to the rules. So basically you play a bunch of cheap spells to get a high storm count, play one of those, and then you can make a huge Niv Magus Elemental. And also, if you've got a Temur Battle Rage or Assault Strobe, you can even give it double strike. So to set that up, we've got Flamekin Harbinger, which can find Niv Magus Elemental, or Kiln Fiend as kind of a backup Niv Magus Elemental that functions much the same way. Then we've got some rituals, Apostle's Blessing for a way to protect our creatures or get them past a blocker, Mutagenic Growth, a free spell that pumps our creature even more. So this deck is capable of really fast kills, can even kill on turn 2 with the right draw, but it's a classic glass cannon, meaning it's very fast, very powerful, but also very fragile. We're relying on small creatures to kill our opponent, and that's pretty risky because, if your combo relies on an artifact or enchantment, let's say, you could hope that they don't have a way to deal with that in their main deck. If you're relying on a small creature, just about everyone has some form of creature removal. So this combo is very fast. It's also very easy to disrupt. But okay, there's that. Let's move on to another one. This is Thopter Sword. So this is based on a 2-card combo, Sword of the Meek and Thopter Foundry. Sword of the Meek is an equipment, gives +1/+2, and whenever a 1/1 creature comes into play under your control, you may return it from the graveyard to the battlefield attached to the creature. Thopter Foundry is an artifact that lets you sacrifice another artifact to put a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature into play, and it also gains you 1 life. So if you have these both in play, you can use Thopter Foundry to sacrifice Sword of the Meek. It makes a 1/1, so then Sword of the Meek immediately pops back out of the graveyard, equipping it. You sacrifice Sword of the Meek again, comes back out, etc. So basically what this allows you to do is for every mana you have, you can create a 1/1 flyer and gain 1 life. And usually that will let you overwhelm your opponent very quickly. However, it doesn't really kill them that quickly. So this deck takes a much different approach than the first one. It has a lot more search, more controlling and interactive elements. We've got counter spells, various creature removal. So it's not going to kill nearly as fast, but it's a lot more flexible and resilient. So just to highlight a few of the other cards, Thirst for Knowledge is kind of the perfect card for this deck because it draws 3 cards, so it can find us our combo, and it wants us to discard an artifact. But that's actually perfect because, in a way, it's even better for us if Sword of the Meek starts in a graveyard rather than in play, because then we can just sacrifice another artifact we might have lying around, like maybe a Darksteel Citadel, to get the combo going, and we'll just go from there. And then we never even have to pay the casting cost for Sword of the Meek. Okay, so yeah, Thirst for Knowledge is great. It's also nice because our combo can be done at instant speed. It's nice to be able to have other stuff, so we can hold up mana. If they don't do anything, just make a bunch of Thopters, but if necessary, maybe we'll counter one of their spells or something. Thopter Spy Network is a nice card for this deck. If we control an artifact, it makes a Thopter, and we deal damage to them, we get to draw a card. So we've got a ton of artifacts in the deck, so it's usually going to be on. And this is a card that creates a Planeswalker-like advantage in a format where it's tough to find the tickets for Planeswalkers. There are a few cheap ones that you can work into your deck sometimes, but this card is actually 2 cents a piece, and in a deck like this creates a huge advantage comparable to a Planeswalker. Another card to highlight would be Dark Petition. I really love this card in this format because it's a really flexible tutor. It only costs you 2 mana on net if you have Spell Mastery. And it can find anything. I'm not sure if this is really the deck for it because we do kind of want to play at instant speed and it's a 5 mana sorcery. But it can find both of our combo pieces. So I don't know, I put it in there to kind of just highlight that this is a card to pay attention to if you're making a combo deck in this format. And then we've just got, some acceleration, a bunch of creature removal and counter spells. Muddle the Mixture is a cool one in this deck because it can either act as a counter spell or transmute to find either of our combo pieces. But that's the deck. Kind of a more restrained, slower but more resilient approach to combo. Alright, here's one more. This one is my take on a Valiquette deck for this format. So Valiquette was the first deck we looked at, the modern deck, and we couldn't use Scapeshift or Primeval Titan. So instead of Scapeshift, I tried to go with Splendid Reclamation, a newer card. This gets all the lands out of your graveyard and onto the battlefield. And then, again, we're still trying to assemble a kill with Valiquette. So we've got a bunch of mana ramp and ways to put mana into our graveyard, and in some cases both. So Edge of Autumn is kind of a cool one for this deck because on turn 2, it can just ramp us like a Rampant Growth. But later on, we can wait until the turn we're about to cast Splendid Reclamation and then just sacrifice a land and immediately return it to play. Colony Heart Expedition is just really fast ramping. Harrow, another card that both sacrifices a land and ramps us, and it goes really well with Colony Heart Expedition because it gets 2 triggers. We've got some just draw and discard to get more lands into our graveyard. Monotheism lets us sacrifice all of our lands just as a combo with Splendid Reclamation, and then Aggressive Mining, another way to sack our lands, kind of a card draw engine to help us find a Splendid Reclamation. And Fire Spout, just as a bit of interaction so we don't get overrun by a fast aggressive deck. And then we've got our lands. We're playing as many mountains as we can get away with to charge up Valiquette. And actually almost the entire cost of the deck is in the mana base for the Valiquettes, and then Cinderblade, very crucial that it counts as a mountain while still being a dual land. Okay, so those are the decks I'm going to show today. I don't really know if any of those decks are good. I would say my guess would be the Thopter Sword is probably the most competitive of the 3, but I'm not really sure. They're just some ideas to get you started. Now, for the end of the video, I want to kind of do a lightning round where I'm just going to show a bunch of interactions and combos that I think have potential. I'm not going to show a full deck list, but just some ideas which you can maybe run with on your own. All right, first one. Hold on a second. Living End. This is actually this is one modern deck that can be ported over. So you've got Living End. you can't cast it, you can only suspend it, but then when you play it, basically it swaps all the creatures in play and in graveyards. Everything that was in play dies, everything that was in the graveyard comes back to the battlefield. Then you've got cascade cards like Violent Outburst, and the idea is you don't play anything in your deck that costs less than 3 except for Living End. It counts as 0 converted mana cost when it gets hit by Violent Outburst. So your cascade cards automatically hit Living End every time, so you're guaranteed to cast it. Then the rest of your deck is mostly creatures that cost more than 3 and cycle cheaply, like Monstrous Carabid, and there are many creatures like this. So basically the idea is you cycle for the first few turns, and then on turn 3, or you can wait if you want, but around turn 3, play a Cascade spell, fire off a Living End to wrath their board, bring a huge army of your own into play, and hopefully win from there. So this is a viable deck in Modern. The price of Living End has been bouncing around a little bit, but if you can pick a moment where it's relatively low, you can fit 3 Living Ends in your deck, which is about what you want. And a few nice things about this deck are all these cycling creatures are mostly commons, and they're really cheap. And even though it tends to be a 3-color deck, usually it's Jund colors, green, black, red. Since you have so many cycling cards, and also some of them are land cyclers that can find basic lands from your deck, you don't need an expensive mana base in order for the deck to function consistently, because all of your cards either cycle or find lands anyway. So you can mostly play basics, and it's going to work just fine. Okay, next up, similar idea, Restore Balance, another one of these suspend cards with no mana cost. This one basically evens out the number of lands, creatures, and hand size for each player. So for example, if you have no creatures, your opponent has to sacrifice all theirs. You could do the same trick with Cascade, but then for this one I'm just showing a different way to do it. Bring to Light also could find a Restore Balance and cast it. Bring to Light's another great tutor for many of these combo decks, because similar to Dark Petition, just a really powerful tutor that's also very cheap. And then to try to break the parity on Restore Balance, you can use Border Posts, which are basically lands, but they count as artifacts. So you can they kind of sneak under Restore Balance. Or just Greater Gargadon, sacrifice your whole board, force them to do the same, and you're left with a 9/7 creature. Okay, this one's pretty simple. Sins of the Past, Enter the Infinite. If you can find a way to dump Enter the Infinite into your graveyard, you can cast it on the cheap with Sins of the Past and draw your whole deck. Devoted Druid and Quillspike. If you have these 2 cards in play, you can tap Devoted Druid for mana, untap it, then use Quillspike's ability to remove the -1/-1 counter and give it +3/+3. Repeat, and you're going to end up with a large Quillspike. Necrotic Ooze, if you have both of the first 2 creatures in your graveyard, Necrotic Ooze gets both of their abilities and can do the whole thing on its own. Okay, here's another one based on creatures. If you've got Viscera Seer, you can use it to sacrifice Safehold Elite. Safehold Elite comes back thanks to Persist with a -1/-1 counter. Anafenza's Bolster ability gives it +1/+1. There's a rule that if a creature has both a +1/+1 and -1/-1 counter, they both go away. So you're left with a healthy Safehold Elite. You can sacrifice it again and repeat the process. Then if you've got anything that triggers when a creature enters the battlefield or dies, you can turn it into an instant win. Polymorph destroys a creature, and then its controller flips cards from the top of their library until they hit another creature and put it into play. So in this case, the idea is you only play one creature in your whole deck. You choose a ridiculously huge and expensive creature like Progenitus, and then you play cards that aren't technically creatures but put creature tokens into play, like Colony Garden. So you make your token, target it with Polymorph, and then you're guaranteed of hitting Progenitus, because you have no other creatures in your deck. Enchanted Evening Patrician Storm. Enchanted Evening turns everything into an enchantment. Patrician Storm destroys all enchantments, and you can play it for free if you played a white spell this turn. And Enchanted Evening happens to be a white spell, so basically this lets you nuke everything for 5 mana. Mirren Spy, Banishing Knack, Everflowing Chalice. You can target your Mirren Spy with Banishing Knack, tap it to return Everflowing Chalice to your hand, play Everflowing Chalice for 0, untap Mirren Spy, bounce it again, etc. And then, again, you combine this with some sort of enters the battlefield trigger, like let's say Altar of the Brood, something like that, and you can win the game. Alright, Possibility Storm. Whenever a player casts a spell, basically they reveal cards from the top of their library until they find a spell of the same type and play that instead. So you play a Possibility Storm, play Endless One for 0. Endless One gets replaced. This is another one where you have to make sure not to include any other creatures in your deck. You play just Emrakul, and you can even start the Endless One in the sideboard and play 4 copies of Coax from the Blind Eternities to find it. But then you play your Endless One, you get to cast Emrakul, and usually that's game over. Okay, well, that's a bunch of ideas. It's still really just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of crazy cards in Modern. Basically, any card you ever saw in the last several years that you kind of went, I bet there's a way to abuse that. Like, that card's still in Modern, and it's, just sitting in the bulk rare bin, ready to leap out and become part of some sort of combo deck. So that's all for today. This was part 2. Part 3 is going to be the final part of the series. That's going to be Control. Until then, good luck in your league matches, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us out. You can find us on Twitter at MagicGathStrat, Facebook /MagicGatheringStrat, or on the web, magicgatheringstrat.com. There you can find articles and free prize-supported leagues. This is all brought to you by our Patreons and cardhoarder.com. If you enjoyed this content, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/MagicGatheringStrat.